what are some prerequisites that you guys like to see on people before? If again, I'd say for mini cuts, you don't have to use them. Very few people end up using accelerated fat loss at all. And I think usually with our females, we're a little bit wary about that. Like hardly ever, do I have a 150-pound female? It's like, yeah, let's just crash diet you in 5 weeks to like 108, 17. No, something to make note of. But what do you guys like to see, before someone, I guess, is qualified to press the mini cut button?
I think if the overriding goal is muscle, then I would like to see an appropriate amount of muscle on an individual. And also experience, I think of like experience level, like where's this person at? Like how far into their training career are they? And then from there, I kind of look at, okay, on the mental and emotional side, where is this person at with nutrition? Do they have a good relationship with food? And things like that. So those are kind of the two big ones that kind of stand out the most right now for me is those two things.
And you'd say that some people are just perfectly comfortable never switching over to a accelerated fat loss phase. They're like, you know what, the way we've done this, where we've gained for X amount of time, and then we just take 12 weeks to take off the excess. Like for some people, that works so well that they're like, you know what, I'm just going to stick to the system because we don't see a whole lot of, like, I've been fat from bulking, and I've never had trauma. Like I don't go back and I'm like, oh, shell shock from the overbulk days. But like fat loss messes people up. Like a few wrong turns, and it gets to the point where people can't follow nothing for a while. So I'd say some folks, wouldn't you say, Jeff, are just completely okay with the slow and steady. It's like, you know what? I'm just going to take the slow and steady rate, a way of doing things. I'm not here to like mess myself up.
I think for me too, I think about, okay, if I'm taking someone and I want them to build some muscle, I'm like, let me do it in a way where I don't get this person
Yeah.
too fat, you know?
Yes.
Like
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
if it's a
Yeah.
little bit more of a methodical, slower approach,
Yep. Yep. Yep.
then in a sense, if you're going slow, you're only gaining so much every so often. One, like you think of the behaviors that go along with that slower
Yes.
pace. Like again,
Yep.
more opportunity to learn when things are slowed
Mm-hmm.
down, right? So if you're not going too fast, you're still in an environment to build muscle, but at the same time, you're learning very good habits. In a sense, it's almost like you're preventative as far as like putting too much body fat on, period. So like, because again, it's like, what's the point of going super, super fast, right? You're gaining hard, then all of a sudden you gotta, oh shit, I gotta actually do a mini cut now because I'm going too fast. I clean shit up. Now I gotta go back to gaining.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's like, let's prevent that as much as possible. So that's why I'm like, okay, if we're in the neighborhood of 6 months, 9 months, maybe even a year or more without even touching any type of deficit, to me, that makes more sense.
Yeah, yeah, I like that. It's like the best way to fix a problem is to not have a problem to begin with, right? To avoid the problem altogether. It's and what you say. It's exactly those are the people who are most attracted to the mini cuts, are the folks who they bulk themselves up way too quick, and they're like, oh, but it's okay because I know how to do this little fat loss thing, and that just interrupts them before they get anywhere. When like in reality, maybe what they should have done, like what I've had to do with people, it's like, okay, maybe at like 15, 16% is where they start to feel uneasy about the way they look. It's like, no,
Mm-hmm.
bro, let's wait here
Yeah.
because this is where the good stuff starts. And you're going
Hmm.
to see that you're probably going to look better in 3 to 4 months than you do now. Uh,
Exactly.
right?
So the longer you're in that environment, because you're training in a very conducive environment, you're going
Yeah.
to make that body look better over time. So let's say you put on 1 pound, 2 pounds of muscle, which is a decent amount of muscle. Let's say you do that
Yes.
in a year
Hmm.
and you're the same body fat percentage, you're going to look superior a year later, even though your body fat percentage is the same. So if you rinse and repeat that even longer, and then let's say you invest depositing those pennies, right? Like you're investing, you're saving your money a year, 2 years, 3 years, go down the road. You haven't touched a deficit. You're in that nice environment. Then you go to cash in. Okay,
Hmm.
let me run a little bit of an extended fat loss phase. And you diet properly down, then all of a sudden your physique is way superior than it used to be. So the same body weights, you're probably like the body weight you were 2 years prior and the same body weight you are now, you just blow it out of the water. So you kind of look at guys like Brian Whitaker, right? Like he only gained a pound of muscle out of how many years? But every
Hmm.
single year he just looks
Hmm.
bigger and leaner, even though the body weight's staying the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
don't you feel like that? Usually the body kind of like it's like it almost kind of at some point you kind of find that level where your gaining just stops. You know, at least in a lot of experience that I've seen, it's like okay, we're getting out of this dieting phase. Our goal right now is to get back to normal. Once we're back to normal, we'll start picking our body weight goals and etc. It almost always seems like it's like, okay, our goal here is to get you to 210 pounds. It seems like it's always like, and it doesn't matter if we're trying to get the 170 pound bodybuilder to 210 pounds, or if we're trying to get the 150 pound bodybuilder to 180 pounds. It's somewhere about halfway. It just seems like it stops. It's like your body kind of finds this place where you have to be uncomfortable. You have to like eat. And Burrow, you've probably experienced this. You have to eat more food than really you want to in order to get your body past that point. One client comes to mind where we tried to get him to 170 and we basically never made it. We got to as high as 168. And I mean, he was experiencing like digestive issues trying to get to 170 pounds. And I kind of feel like at some point, regardless of what your bulking goal is, your body kind of has its own stopping point somewhere. And then it's just going to be kind of a matter of, okay, do we want to like get extreme to get there? Do we want to, like you said, Burrow, do we want to like do a quick cut, stimulate the appetite a little bit, maybe get the body primed for putting on a little bit more weight, whether it be muscle, fat, what have you. But I kind of feel like at some point your body's going to fight back and it's not going to want to put that weight on. I know that's not universal. Berto, you did manage to get yourself to about 250 pounds with your squirrel-like metabolism. But nonetheless, I'm sure at that point, you probably had it. You had to work to get there. You had to eat those, what was it, like 7-pound sandwiches that you were eating at some point?
Yeah. 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 It's just good for you to feel that, because a lot of physique athletes will go their entire lifting career kind of always being wary of like that hunger boogeyman. So I think it does you some good from a mental standpoint to like have almost the other problem where it's like, man, this eating all the time is kind of getting annoying. And what I find like it does for me, because whenever I switch to my fat loss phase, is that I'm almost like happy to see hunger. It's like, well, this feels kind of nice to like look forward to my next meal, to feel a little empty. Whereas I think anyone who's had a successful fat loss phase where they've gotten themselves pretty lean, you know how it goes. Like the months after, you're just hunger almost freaks you out, almost scares you, kind of sets off the alarms. And again, time away from that, getting to what you described, Brad, I think just does you a lot of good in regards to the whole adherence, in regards to how stressful the fat loss is going to be for you. And like Jeff said, simultaneously, while you're working on all the mental stuff, you're going to be putting on all this muscle that you've never given yourself the chance to put on, because you won't go that far in regards to body weight.
Like for me personally, like when I look back at my situation, which is not going to apply for everybody, but when I look back at the good old days, back in the 80s, 90s, no one was mini cutting. It was like, I'm talking about competitive bodybuilders, like, hey, it's off season, bro. We're freaking eating. I'm going to eat and I'm going to train my ass off, and then I'm going to diet when it's prep time. And that was, in a sense, my ratio was, okay, anywhere like 6 to 9 months of gaining, and then, okay, we got 3 months, 4 months, 5 months of cutting for a show. And then, of course, we didn't know any better as far as taking extended off seasons. So in a sense, the ratio just extends out. And when I look back at my history, and I wish I knew more about dieting and all that at the time, but I always made progress every year. It was like, I look at my photos and all that, my physique got bigger every time. I can't look back on any year where I didn't actually get bigger. And if there might have been one or two, and that's just because I over dieted. I basically chewed up all my muscle. So that kind of right there just tells me, like, looking at my history, like, I don't think it's essential that you have to have mini cuts in your programming in order to maximize your gains. Like, for me, that just, it doesn't make sense that, okay, we have to program these in order to maximize your gains. I think, and there's also other things I look at too, just outside of just like, okay, what does maybe the research or science say is like, okay, how do we maximize the gains? But it's like, how is this approach going to impact just life in general? Because I mean, we're human, we're not robots. Like, we're not going to be in like four walls and that's all we're worrying about is these four walls. Like, if we have a social life, we have work life. So the weekend rolls around and okay, oh shit, I can't really go out or do this because I'm mini cutting. I can't have a drink. I can't have, I can't eat at a restaurant or something like that. So I think all these things have to take into account as far as like, how we approach mini cuts as well. Like, how do we incorporate the social aspect into this part of it? And that's something I take into consideration too when I'm programming mini cuts for people. It's like I have one guy cutting now, again, coming off of an extended gaining phase where in the past he would always want to stay on the leaner side. So I took him out of his comfort zone and had him gaining for a good amount of time. Now we're cutting to see what's underneath. But the way we have his cut going is he's going a little more hard during the week, Monday through Friday. Saturday, Sunday, he's more social with his family, has drinks, goes out and things like that. So he's eating more food on the weekends to kind of be flexible and cater to both kind of the bodybuilding side of things, but also the social and the real life aspect as well.
Yeah, and it's funny that you mentioned that, Jeff, because if we would have been holding this podcast like, say, 8 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to have been on it because at that time I was anti mini cut. I never had anybody run mini cuts. But at the same time, I'm not going to say that, what I was doing was necessarily better because a lot of times I was prescribing gaining phases that were just way too slow. They were way too slow and they were way too restrictive. But my thinking was, basically we want to gain the entire time until it's time to prep again, basically. And if we can not put on a whole lot of weight, we're going to be in a better position to diet then. And so I was way too restrictive and way too slow, with my gaining phases. I always, in my mind, used this term gaintaining, which in my mind was let's gain strength in the gym, but maintain body weight, or at least it goes up like, a pound every 2 months or something like that. And so I'm very much 180 to that approach now. Now I actually push for a little bit more weight gain. And like Berto said, use mini cuts as a bridge to get from like, okay, we want to get from now to say, like I used before, 212, or I wanted to get that 150 bodybuilder to 170, but we're going to stretch that out to make that happen over the course of 8 months, 10 months, 12 months, etc. So I utilize mini cuts a lot more, and that's why I feel like I'm much better prepared to have this podcast, obviously, today. But I always kind of tell people, and I'm really surprised, as of late, these last 6 months, when I'm telling people, we need to put some weight on, we need to put some weight on, we need to put some weight on, people are very receptive. I'm really, really surprised at how many of these people are receptive. And so I always tell them, okay, here's the Brad from 8 years ago on the left, gain a pound every 2 months, something way too slow. And then on the other end of the spectrum on the right, we have to look at the people that are on the planet that have the most fat-free mass ever, and those are sumo wrestlers, right? Those guys, they just keep putting on muscle like all the flipping time. But as an aesthetic athlete, obviously we don't want to go to that extreme. So if those are the two opposite ends of the spectrum, right, we want to be somewhere in the middle. And so we always have to kind of deal with insecurities, but at the same time balance that with what we know is the best way to go about it, And I mean, I'll admit it, it's not hard to excuse me, it's hard to admit when, boy, I should not have done that to all of my clients and even myself, during those years. But at the same time, it's like, I got to do what I know works best. And so, that's the moral of my long drawn out story there.